Today is Tuesday, May 8th, 2012, and this is the Pastel Pony Podcast. I am your host, VozDeSuenos. Welcome, fillies and gentle colts alike. Wonderful, wonderful bronies. As of yesterday, I hadn't actually recorded this, when I usually do. I closed and then opened, which is the most fun thing in the world. For those of you who know that feeling, I apologize. I wish you didn't have to. Anyhow, I had almost nothing to talk about, especially because here in about an hour and a half, I'm leaving for a Weird Al concert. Because I'm a geek. I'm such a geek. For those of you outside the United States, Weird Al makes parodies of... Well, and for those of you who don't actually know it, here in the States, he is a musician for about the past 20 or 30 years who has been making his living off of making parodies of popular songs as well as original music. And he's sort of a comedian and a huge uber geek of awesomeness. I'm excited. Anyhow, I had almost nothing to talk about because I have literally spent probably 12 to 15 hours in the past week editing An Equestrian Invasion. Twice. I have one more to go. I planned on doing 3 edits. A bunch of people have been really awesome, specifically Final Gamer James has been really awesome in helping me by giving me feedback on the original edits just so that I can sort of fine-tune it and tweak it in the ways that I want. If I had a budget and could actually pay my voice actors, we would have been doing more takes. I would have been doing way more takes if I wasn't, working full-time. But, c'est la vie. That's life. That's war. Whatever. Life is war. It will not be up to the standard that I want it to be at, regardless of what I do in the next week. So, I'm just going to do whatever I can to get it up to the highest possible quality I can possibly do. Anyhow, that being said, I'm going to end this podcast with like a 3 to 5 minute trailer. It's not going to be like a movie trailer in that it's a bunch of random scenes that make no sense to you. It's actually going to be a full chunk of an interview between Golden Gallops, as played by Doomwad765, and me as Focal Lens. I will mention, the voice for Focal Lens, because I've gotten better at Orson Welles over the past 6 months, changes a little bit throughout the whole thing. This is the oldest scene in terms of, it's not the first scene in the radio play. It is, however, the first that was spliced together. It is also the first one that was completely done. It's been done for months. Whereas most of the scenes have only been done for the past 2 weeks. I think the interview with Golden Gallops and Pear Tree and the interview with Golden Gallops and Focal Lens are really the only old things. Everything else has been done rather recently, as I lacked the motivation, even though I had lines for ages and ages. Anyways, I'm rambling on about this. Preview at the end. That's what you're going to hear. Let me move on before I forget some of these things. First off, important, next week, next Tuesday, 1 week from today, 4:30, as in 16:30 military time, Eastern Standard Time, United States. That is the date and time. VozDeSuenos, same as ever, is the Skype name. If you're online, I will be on a little bit before that, just to be sure. But 4:30, 16:30, anyone who's there. It's probably going to be crazy. I don't know what editing is going to be like. It's probably going to take weeks. We'll see. I might even make it a normal episode as opposed to a podcast episode just because, yeah. In addition to that, I also have the outtakes unedited as of right now, but for episodes 31 through 40. So there's an outtakes coming sometime soon as well. Now, that being said, I'm still planning on the episode following An Equestrian Invasion to be Past Sins. I had really wanted to do the next couple chapters of So Long. So I believe what I'm thinking right now is An Equestrian Invasion next week, then Past Sins 2 weeks from that, and then a bunch of So Long after that. And we'll see whether or not I release the outtakes in between then, and how things go with the crazy season review of ridiculousness. But, yes, 16:30, 4:30 in the afternoon, Eastern Standard Time, May 15th, 2012. If you want to be involved, VozDeSuenos on Skype. If you don't have a microphone, that will make things harder. But I can still try. We'll see what happens. Now, other things. Media, videos. Oh! Equestrian Musically has actually gotten what appears to be more editors and is updating more frequently and more regularly now, which is really cool. They have a music roundup as of this week. It is only going to be once per week, but it's essentially the same concept as the nightly roundup on Equestria Daily, but music. I haven't been through this week's yet, but that's where I get a lot of my music, in addition to just listening to random people while I'm doing art. But as I'm sure you can imagine, with all the time I've spent on An Equestrian Invasion this week, I have done very, very little artwork. Now, more media. Oh! Actually, before the media, I just wanted to point out something that Adam the person who's playing the stranger in An Equestrian Invasion pointed out to me. I love random coincidences because they're life's way of making you realize you're really insane. Orson Welles' birthday was 2 days ago, which means that in within 9 days of his birthday, I will be releasing this, and that's kind of exciting and awesome. Anyhow, I only have a few more things for you. First off, Put Trust in Fate has an extraordinary number of upheaval chapters online. I actually cannot say anything to the quality of this as of yet. I was asked to look at it, and because of how much time I've been spending both at work and on An Equestrian Invasion, I haven't actually made it to this yet, but when I do, I'll let you know. Still, if you like upheaval, or you want another story to listen to, have at it. Mr. E380 has actually been recording one of the stories by one of the other viewers, Cody. So Cody's story about Pinkamena is being recorded by Mr. E380. Cool stuff. Final Gamer James, actually, another thing about him, fantastic Scottish brony that we've talked about several times before, mentioned this in an email to me in response to something I said in the podcast last week. I was saying I wanted people to send me stories of siblings that never fought. As I said last week, find that extremely unbelievable. Although, as I've started thinking about it, my little sister, who's like 6 years old in about a month or two, and I have also never fought. But that is mostly because she is, 18 years younger than me, and I hardly ever see her. And I'm sure that when she's a teenager, I will do my best not to fight with her, but, I love you, sis. If you ever hear this. Anyhow. He says he and his big sister never fought, at least that he can remember. They were always doing their own things. She's 5 years older, and she was really excited from the moment he was born. There was no sibling rivalry, and she's just a really nice and awesome person. She taught him how to laugh and understand humor. She taught him how to play video games, and she stood up for him when he was being bullied by bad neighbors. Even to this day, right before her wedding, she took him out for pizza, and that's such an amazing story. I'm sorry that you guys don't get to see each other much anymore, but I hope that it continues to be an amazing relationship like that. That's really heartwarming and very happy, and I wish that my brother and our relationship has gotten much better since college. But back in high school, I was a terrible older brother, and I admit that. I was just awful. I've apologized to him, actually, many times for the older brother that I was, basically from the time I was about 7 onwards. He's only 2 years younger. But yeah. But anyhow, speaking of my brother, you won't get to hear it yet, but as I said about the Golden Gallops and Pear Tree thing, my brother is actually the one playing Pear Tree, and I don't know if I've mentioned this or not, but that turned out, it's actually one of my favorite moments in the entire thing. Just because The guy playing Golden Gallops sent me all his lines, and while I may have tweaked one or two in the past week or so, when I got them at first, I wouldn't have asked him to re-record a single thing. And I didn't. They're fantastic. But he did all of that without ever having anyone speaking for him as Pear Tree. My brother did all of his lines in a single take perfectly. They are wonderful, and they fit together so well. And it's just a very humorous scene, and I can't wait for you guys to hear it next week. But you don't get to hear that this week. You only get my lines with Doomwad. So, that is all I have to say, with the exception of a single solitary review, before I give you the wonderments of Golden Gallops and Focal Lens. This review comes to you from the depths of time and space. I have known this man for about 5 years. Only met him in person about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. He is a good friend that I have done filler hiatus artwork for his webcomic. The thing is, about 3-4 months ago, he sent me, or posted, actually, he posted on Facebook a pinup of a humanized version of Twilight Sparkle, and I broke into the biggest smile. I'm like, "Are you a brony?" He said, no, I think it's an interesting show, and I watched it with my little son. Then a month or two later, he told me he was working on a fanfic. And I couldn't wait to see it, and then I sort of forgot about it for a while, because he never said anything, he never sent it to me. It turns out FimFiction refused to take it because it's humanized. Since it's technically not about ponies, they refused to take it. Which, both according to what he said and what I'm going to agree with, it's very sad because it's more well-written than half of the stuff you find on there. In fact, it's incredibly well-written. It's his very first shot at trying something in second person, and it put the biggest smile on my face when I was reading it today. I haven't finished it yet. I've got a couple, like maybe 2 pages left, but it just feels like college. It captures that college feeling so well. And the plot is that you are a creative writer in a class with Rarity who doesn't care at all about creative writing. And you are assigned to work on a project together. And it is done very artfully, very tastefully, and the descriptiveness is characteristic of his other work. He's actually, I don't know if it's published or not yet, but he's written a full-length novel. So you can expect great things from this fan fiction, especially if you like second-person narrative. It was just so much fun. It is called Coffee and Creativity by Bardsworth Brony, which incidentally, because that's the proper word, coincidentally, if you like the writing style, he has been working on his webcomic for the better part of 6 or 7 years now. It has slowed down since he's had a kid, but it is wonderful, and I love it so much, and I cannot tell you how happy it makes me when he updates. I will post a link both to Coffee and Creativity and to the comic Bardsworth, which, while not about ponies, is about fantasy and magic. It's family friendly. It's got an awesome main character, and side characters get introduced that become main characters, and I love them all. I will not tell you much more than that, but it feels a lot like Harry Potter, so if you like Harry Potter, I am fairly certain you will like this. And without further ado, I have little left to tell you, fillies and gentle colts. It is a short week, but a good week, and I can't wait for next week. So, safe travels every pony. Enjoy the preview.
Good evening, fillies and gentle colts. This is Golden Gallops, speaking to you from the observatory at Trottingham. I'm standing in a large, semicircular room, pitch black except for an oblong split in the ceiling. Through this opening I can see a sprinkling of stars that cast a kind of frosty glow over the intricate mechanism of the huge telescope. The ticking sound you hear is the clockwork gears moving the aperture of the machine. Professor Focal Lens stands directly above me on a small platform, peering through the giant lens. Now I ask you to be patient, fillies and gentlecolts, during any delay that may arise during our interview. Besides his ceaseless watch of the heavens, Professor Focal Lens may be interrupted by telephone or other communications. During this period, he is in constant touch with the astronomical centers of the world. Professor, may I begin our questions?
At any time, Mr. Gallops.
Professor, would you please tell our radio audience exactly what you see as you observe the moon through your telescope?
Well, nothing unusual at the moment, Mr. Gallops. A light gray swimming in a blue sea. Transverse stripes across the disk. Quite distinct now because the moon happens to be at the point nearest to Equestria. In opposition, as we call it.
In your opinion, what do these transverse stripes signify, Professor Focal Lens?
Not canals, I can assure you, Mr. Gallops. Although that's the popular conjecture of those who imagine the moon to be inhabited. From a scientific viewpoint, the stripes are merely the result of our imperfect telescopes trying to properly render the dust strata on the surface.
Then you're quite convinced as a scientist that living intelligence as we know it does not exist on the moon?
I'd say the chances against it are 1,000 to 1, if you don't count Princess Luna's visit.
And yet, how do you account for these gas eruptions occurring on the lunar surface at regular intervals?
Mr. Gallops, I cannot account for it.
By the way, Professor, for the benefit of our listeners, how far is the moon from Equestria?
Approximately 385,000 kilometers.
Well, that seems a safe enough distance.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just a moment, fillies and gentlecolts. Somebody has just handed Professor Focal Lens a message. While he reads it, let me remind you that we are speaking to you from the observatory in Trottingham, where we are interviewing the world-famous astronomer, Professor Focal Lens. One moment, please. Professor Focal Lens has passed me a message which he has just received. Professor, may I read the message to the listening audience?
Certainly, Mr. Gallops.
Fillies and gentlecolts, I shall read you a wire addressed to Professor Focal Lens from Dr. Gray of the National History Museum in Manhattan. Quote, 6:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Seismograph registered shock of almost earthquake intensity occurring within a radius of 20 kilometers of Trottingham. Please investigate. Signed, Comet Gray, Chief of Astronomical Division. Unquote. Professor Focal Lens, could this occurrence possibly have something to do with the disturbances observed on the moon?
Oh, hardly, Mr. Gallops. This is probably a meteorite of unusual size. Its arrival at this particular time is merely a coincidence. However, we shall conduct a search as soon as daylight permits.
Thank you, Professor. Fillies and gentlecolts, for the past 10 minutes we've been speaking to you from the observatory at Trottingham, bringing you a special interview with Professor Focal Lens, noted astronomer. This is Golden Gallops speaking. We are returning you now to our Manhattan studio.